Hi, this is Keith Reed. I'm the owner operator of Rack to Retail Media. We cover issues that are important to fuels marketing and fuels retailing and charging. And today I'm speaking with Mark Fitz, who's president of Star Oilco. He's a Northwestern fuels marketer, primarily more in the commercial and industrial type of space, not really a gasoline distributor, but you do bulk fuels, heating oil, wet hosing, that block of the industry that's kind of a niche, but it's a pretty significant one, generator fueling, fuels quality testing, and that type of stuff. How are you doing, Mark?
Doing well. I'd also brag that we common carry to a lot of retail.
Okay, now you're
So
primarily, you do diesel and gasoline for that, or is
we
it?
we do diesel and gasoline. We common carry for quite a few people. And
Oh, very good.
one of the things with biofuels is there's a lot of truck time required if you want to get to know the people who are moving ethanol, biodiesel, renewable diesel. Offer trucks conveniently, and you'll get to know the people who get you that product.
Mark and I go a bit back. Mark is, first of all, he likes to be involved in the industry in a variety of levels. He likes to get information out. Uh, it's been interesting. I've done a few profiles on him in the past, but he's also one of the more wired in people. And I suppose that's part of the job, but it seems to be more wired in than a lot of folks relative to low carbon issues in the Northwest, Oregon, and also Washington, and uh, involved in the associations that serve those markets. And in fact, right now you're at the 2026 Oregon Fuels Association convention. Mark, tell us a little bit about that organization and the event you're at and what's really on the docket for this year.
Oh, beautiful. So I am wrapping up my term on the Oregon Fuel Association board. So this will be my final board meeting coming up here today at the conference. I am on the Washington Oil Marketers Board, though, and I'm also, as I exit Oregon, I am Oregon's EMA representative for the Energy Marketers of America, which then also has me attending the WPMA as well. So I've been pretty engaged. If you go back, California's rules on trucks, and know that to your listeners in this industry, I tend to be to the left of them on subjects of carbon reduction, biofuels, that type of stuff. Now, just know, environmentalists not exactly invite me to Christmas dinner, right? I am definitely in the fuel business, in the petroleum distribution business, but that comes up. But when they outlawed diesel trucks, and we could not get those, I really got engaged at every level I possibly could. You know what I mean? Going to DC, going to our state legislators and begging them to basically tap out on this electric heavy duty truck thing that doesn't exist. I mean, I had literally testimony where Daimler and PACCAR saying these trucks aren't going to be available. They don't exist. And they were going forward. You know what I mean? If it wasn't for, the waiver adjustment of Trump in his first day in office, we literally went 6 months where we couldn't legally buy a heavy duty truck. You know what I mean? So and they also had outlawed muscle cars. I mean, just to put it
Yeah.
bluntly, they outlawed gasoline engines. And it just, to me, to stand by, and I didn't think the argument that I've made in the Oregon industry is we have been captured by cannibals, and rather than fighting for our lives, we're negotiating to be eaten last.
Yeah.
Right. And
That's
I'm
not
like, we shouldn't
uncommon.
be eating people. That was my argument. Right. So based on that, I wanted to get more involved and see it. I didn't know anything about Washington. I had never been to DC, and that just kind of took off in that way. So that landed me on a number of boards. I'm a little heavy on the boards, so I'm moving off OFA. I will be in the Washington Oil Marketers because it is very interesting learning more and getting to know the people in Washington, which is a much bigger economy than Oregon. There's a lot more going on. It's kind of interesting. I also don't know how to dress because they keep showing up with ties and jackets. It's kind of fascinating to come from Oregon where everyone's wearing Romeos and jeans, and I got to pack a bigger wardrobe. But that's with Oregon's Fuel Association, though. We have a conference. It is a very great conference. I would say compared to things I attend, it is a very low cost at a very high end, great resort. Washington's conference in Suncadia is similar. We're in Sun River in Oregon. So we have these great Pacific Northwest surrounded by trees, the most amazing golf courses you can imagine. No one's seen a Sasquatch yet, but there is an opportunity, right? So it's a great conference, and it's just basically getting to know the people in our state, our industry, our vendors. And I'd say in Oregon, we often have regulators who attend as well. So you get to really ask questions in a more non-adversarial environment, which I think is something that's great about Oregon, is the fact that, you know, the regulators that we have, even though they're regulating carbon, they want us to be successful. And similarly, we have real issues with a pipeline and a potential major earthquake. So they're focused on resilience. So we have people from the governor's office here wanting to make sure supply is provided.
Right.
That is a backdrop against the city of Portland, though, that is trying to outlaw fossil fuels.
Right.
Yeah. So we have two things going on in Portland, Oregon, which are not necessarily things the state is assisting with.
Sure.
And that is, Portland has a fossil fuel phase out currently going forward. As of July 1 of 2026, we are required to be 50% biomass-based diesel content. So up to 20% biodiesel and a minimum 50% blend of biodiesel and renewable diesel in the fuel.
Right.
They had a curveball on that. Last year it was a 40 CI. Now it is a 46 CI, which opens up a lot more renewable diesel product to meet it. But virgin soy and virgin canola feedstocks typically don't hit the CO2 threshold. So it reduces the amount of fuel available to us, right? Like the biggest biodiesel plant in the Pacific Northwest, Chevron Grays Harbor, its CO2 emissions are too high to be sold in Portland, right?
Yeah.
So it makes supply kind of a trick from time to time.
So you've got a more complicated supply situation. What is the supply situation like for 2030 when it's supposed to be, you know, fully converted over?
Well, if you believe what they believe, we're going to see more refineries flip to making renewable products. But of course, what we're seeing in California is the real estate's worth too much, right? So Phillips 66 is able to sell the land underneath the refinery rather than flip it.
Right.
Valero is going to become a terminal, so we don't know what will happen with the refinery there in California. There is a ton of potential renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel technology startups out there pursuing that, right? And if you were curious to like review those technologies, it's interesting stuff. Supply-wise, I'm optimistic, but at the same time, you know, there's no telling.
Yeah.
You know, especially if New Mexico's ramping up a program, if New York State, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, they follow, right? That's a lot of fuel. And if you have the Northeast competing with the West Coast out of the Gulf Coast, what does that do to us? I don't know. You know, and Canada is no small, and Europe is ramping up.
Right.
You know, have you ever heard the phrase Scope 3 emissions?
Yes.
Right. So Scope 1 is my truck's drive. That's their footprint. Scope 2 is if I use another common carrier, they're doing work for me. That's their emissions or my responsibility too. Scope 3 is the universe of everything my business does.
Right. Yep.
So Microsoft, Amazon, huge players are worried about the Scope 3. You know what I mean? And that's also driving this as well the world over. With SAF, you know, corporations that don't have a big industrial footprint, the Scope 2 and Scope 3 is where it is, and their big Scope 3 is air travel. You know, so it you know, that's going to create, depending on how serious that is, you're going to have a lot of demand for these gallons the world over.
Right. Now, in 2030, it's going to be 99% R99, basically, renewable. You can get I think you had mentioned a 20% biodiesel mixture into that. That might help eliminate or alleviate some of the renewable pressure a little bit, I would assume.
Yeah. Well, the cheapest diesel right now with the 50% mandate is R80B20.
Right.
But carbon prices are through the roof. RINs are super high. Diesel prices are high. So the true up, all the way through, the market's got a wind to its back for renewable bio blends to be cheap. If diesel drops to a wholesale price of $1 something, right, that probably is not the case.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I'll predict we're going to see a glut if Iran ever settles down.
Right. What now, folks like you, you're looking at supply. How are you preparing for basically addressing the almost doubling of requirements coming up here shortly?
Well, there's a great book by a guy named Nassim Taleb called Anti-Fragile.
Yeah.
And in that book, he describes that what makes businesses long-term successful to survive, anti-fragility, is options. So we're trying to build the business to have as many options as possible, to know that we don't know where we get supply could look very different. And I would state that in the last year, the Olympic pipeline, which is 90% of the fuel coming into Oregon is through terminals and that pipeline, right, in Portland. We were driving to Idaho to get non-ethanol premium last year because we could not get it at all.
Right.
This year, we've been hauling non-ethanol premium that direction, and we've been picking up diesel, bringing it back $1 cheaper than Portland's, right? So you have these economics that to be able to be in the game, you're going to have flexibility that historically you go back 10 years ago, everyone say, I'm not doing that. You may have to be more open and looking where is the opportunity based on that. Similarly, our whole industry in the Pacific Northwest was World War II. We built a bunch of refineries. We built this infrastructure. We built these airports. That's the way everything flows. And today, with these low carbon standards, it's going to be rail and barge bringing stuff in, which creates a different dynamic of where you can get product, where you can move it. Then you add the additional, as you talk about supply, we used to buy low and sell high with diesel. We now must buy low and sell high with diesel or gasoline, not exceed the allowances we have because you have a cap and invest program where you can't sell more than you sold last year for gas and diesel. So you have to buy low and sell high, not exceed your market share that's reducing every year, and blend biofuels that then create a carbon credit, which is another arbitrage to buy low and sell high in the, and then also you got a RIN in there too, right?
Yeah.
So you've got all these options to think about. I predict retail gas is really well situated to line up guaranteed gallons and how that flows through, if that makes sense. Commercial diesel, if you're doing day bids, it's going to be all over the place. There are days that we're running the table, picking up business against huge players that 10 years ago had never been the case because stuff just bounced that way, right?
Right.
So optionality, anti-fragility, that's what I'm working on.
Now, how are your customers, and that beyond that, how are their customers reacting to this deadline that's looming out there?
Well, no one seems to know, right? That's the thing that kind of gets me is we've been very aggressive. I have one retail station. We serve, probably, dozens more, but we've got one that I own that I set prices for and watch to it. I've aggressively watched that diesel price, watch Mudflap, watch Gas Buddy, watch the market, right? And I don't know if people are just getting a insane amount of margin or if I'm literally buying that much better, but it looks to me like I'm buying better. Or there's such a lack of knowledge of what's going on, the branded supply that people are getting, right? You know what I mean? Like we're pushing you a B5 price, which is higher than the renewable price. And you're just, I kind of wonder about that.
Yeah.
So it's unknown. But as I talk to people, we have been very aggressive on our diesel pricing because the truckers that we served out of the station I've got, it was $7 a gallon in Seattle.
Yeah.
Right, for diesel.
Yeah.
We were over $1 something. We were like $1.50 cheaper than stations in Longview, Washington, that these truckers were coming. They were routing themselves to come through for us. And as you talk to them about the prices, you know, you remember being a teenager and you'd pay for gas counting out
Vaguely.
pennies. It felt like that.
Yeah.
It felt like that as they're
Yeah.
looking at what they can do. And these are real business people that we've, you know, so we got very aggressive with our PUC diesel pricing for them, and it was kind of noted. And you know, it's been interesting to watch because no one's followed. Even Mudflap, you know, has been 20 cents higher than where we are with good margin for diesel for that in Portland. So either people are making a ton of money or no one knows, you know what I mean?
Right.
And getting a branded letter, you know, you're a gas station and you have to get a branded supply that sends a letter to the city of Portland, says your product was, you know, proof it's over this percentage, over 50%, and the CO2 was below this. And by the way, the state of Oregon does not play ball with the city of Portland's with those pathways. They do not disclose to them. So if the city asked the state, tell us this is this, they would say, you know, like, all I can say is they had this much was brought into the state, right? So they have a mass balance. They don't have a real receipts level. So, you know, Marathon, Sinclair, Shell, Chevron, you know, 76 brand, they basically would say, hey, you got B20, R80, or with 76 it'd be R99. With Chevron, I believe it's 20% biodiesel, 30%, 35% renewable, and the rest fossil diesel, because that has the lowest NOx. It's the cleanest tailpipe in their opinion, right? You know, Marathon I think is R99, Holly Frontier is R99, B20 and B5 is what they list, right? They're then saying, like, if you pulled on these numbers, it met the standard, the 46 carbon number, you know, which is basically a 54% reduction in carbon against fossil fuel diesel is what that number means. So over half. So did that make sense? Did I answer that question?
It does. You know, and it sounds like it's going to be one of those interesting things. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, I suppose as it gets closer, is there any possibility if this is starting to trend in the wrong direction that they would put a halt or an adjustment or the brakes on?
Well, not only are they trying to phase out diesel,
right.
They're also trying to remove 20% of the terminal storage because it's unsafe to have tanks where there could be earthquakes, right? And in talking with the staff at the city, the argument is the fire marshal had told them that they don't use all the tanks at any given time. 20% of the tanks aren't being used. To which I pointed out, if you had 100% full closet, it probably wouldn't be very functional.
Right.
Your closet is probably 70, 80% full. If you had 100% full garage, they would call you a hoarder.
Right.
Right. So therefore, you know, their logic on progressing this, you know, we have had a Democrat governor for 40 years. We have a very credible Republican running against the sitting Democrat, right? Like, the story is old as time in America these days. All the lobbyists presume that only Democrats win statewide, but if you had a Republican governor, I would say telling Portland they can't hold the whole state hostage on that what, by the way, was renamed the Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub is what it's called. And I believe that was the state of Oregon that called it that, to make sure when it's in the news, it's the Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub is what it's called that they want to reduce the tanks on. So how can you tell Oregon doesn't agree with Portland's? Yeah. Sometimes you can tell. Yeah.
You know,
but I could see there'd be something come in. I also wonder, the federal government, Trump, with his executive orders, has threatened that if they get in the way of this energy infrastructure, they would come in with eminent domain on the federal level, if that makes sense. So we've heard talk of that in California around pipelines.
Right.
I've seen some stuff out of Politico. From like the Energy Marketers of America have shared some stuff on that.
Sure.
I don't follow it closely, but I wonder.
Well, it's interesting stuff, Mark. It really is. And I'm sure we'll be talking. Actually like to regularly discuss what's going on in the Northwest, but also the West Coast, the California folks, and because it's one of the more exciting energy markets in the country, and it's for good and bad, certainly exciting, but it's one of those areas where folks like yourself and fuel retailers as well have to be very on the ball and very firing on all cylinders, just not only to stay in business, but I think folks like yourself that are really in touch with things can not only just keep up with it, but there are opportunities that come up when these things develop
Well,
if you're
I
in
love
tune
the
enough to
Pacific
take
Northwest.
advantage of that.
Yeah. Well, I love the Pacific Northwest, and the gasoline's not going away. You know what I mean? Diesel is definitely not going away. We've had, a decade of every policy you could imagine to require EV adoption. And it looks to me like PC versus Mac, like electric people are buying Rivian and Teslas, and they're a portion of the market that loves that product, right? Then you've got people who bought their first electrics, typically Ford, Chevy, Hyundai, Kia, and they liked them, they love them, but then they trade in for a hybrid plug-in,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so we're going to see where fuel mileage probably pushes 60, 70 miles the gallon as the EV technology moves along, but they're still buying gas. You know what I mean? So what you'll see is a flattening of gallons, but it won't drop, and then diesel will continue to back up all the electric infrastructure. I mean, these data centers, like that's actually, if you want to look at a trend in fuel that's coming through, these data centers have to have super clean, super consistent power.
Yeah.
And the way power works, so we literally got a call and we were helping one out. They can go from $0 to $1 million bill on diesel in days, in a day, some of them, right? And it's crazy, like that trend in particular, the amount of diesel being pulled, or even if they're doing natural gas, or even there's an immense amount of power that needs to be ramped up randomly if some other interruption in the world occurs.
Yeah.
Right. That leads me to believe natural gas and diesel are not going away.
No.
If we're relying on cell phones and computers.
Well, Mark, I appreciate it. I know you got to get back to some stuff here, and what's next on the list for your OFA schedule coming up?
We have a board meeting. We've got a cocktail party reception. If I'm lucky, there will be cigars. We'll find out. And then tomorrow morning, we have a whole round of classes. I'm pretty excited. I get to introduce Greg Woldrich, boss, who was very instrumental in the Blue Angel movie that you can watch on Amazon. But he is the only person to be a 3-time Blue Angel, 2-time commander of the Blue Angels. He is an impressive human being. He ran for Oregon governor. He ran for governor of Oregon once, too, by the way.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how long ago. It was a while. But, yeah, he's an impressive guy. I'm pretty excited I get to introduce him to everybody. I get to shake his hands in front of there'll be a picture, proof. Right. So, all right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, and I'll take care of a little business. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button, and that way you'll be informed of new content that comes up and help me out on the algorithm. Thanks again, Mark. Appreciate it, and talk to you soon.
Thank you.